Great. So the future of Hollywood, no pressure at all. Gigi and Clint, and I'm Molly Wood. And so the thing about virtual reality is it's really early, right? As everyone knows. And not everybody's quite ready for it. And so you guys are taking an interesting approach, which I want you to talk about, which is to go soup to nuts, to say, look, if we're at the Apple II stage of virtual reality, we're going to lay the groundwork for all of the apps that are yet to, the software programs that are yet to be built. We're going to be like build VisiCalc, but also invest in these platforms, right? Tell us what Madison Wells is doing. Gigi?
I like to be called
Making
on.
it
It makes
easy.
it much easier, right, exactly. So a few years ago, I was at Sundance, and the 14 years prior had gone to movies and movies and movies and movies, and then discovered New Frontiers and saw what was happening in VR, and it just absolutely spun my head around. And it became very clear to me that now technology had met the filmmakers and the artists and the storytellers, and that's where it was going to really start to take off, and that's where I wanted to be a part of it. And so Clint and I got together and started building out the VR portion of what we're doing. And so in order to allow the art form to build, because we're at the beginning of that as well, we want to be the place where the artists can be, where the visionary people who have been making films and theater and all kinds of other things can express themselves in a different medium. But that also requires us to invest in technology companies as well. So we feel both places is where we want to be.
And can you talk about those investments?
Well, there's a William Goldman quote that nobody knows anything in Hollywood, and that actually applies to VR as well. Quite literally, now it's very hard to understand exactly how it will be monetized, exactly how big the user base will be, what kinds of content are interesting. But what we know for sure is that the humans will be the ones that create it. The storytellers, the people who have had success in other mediums, will be the ones that present that and deliver that to people. So Gigi and I have taken the position that if we find and support the groups of extremely talented humans, particularly people like Jon Favreau and other people that we're doing projects with, who have had a great deal of success in other mediums, we can amplify what they're doing creatively, because everyone who you talk to wants to get into VR in some form or another, and we can take advantage of that in the short run here and build a brand around it.
So what is, if you were going to describe Madison Wells Media for those people who have not heard of it, you are a production studio plus investment?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Yep.
And I think for us, what we are is about content and expressing storytelling across a number of platforms. So whether it's live, whether it's television, whether it's film, whether it's digital, whether it's VR, it's building and developing the stories that then get put out in the world in the way that makes the most sense for them.
What are some of the technologies you've invested in?
The most recently, Wevr, which is a name some people might know. They're a Venice-based VR startup that's done some extraordinary things. Most importantly, in addition to the content that they make, which I suggest everyone go check out, if you just Google Wevr, it will be well worth your time. But they've also created something called transport. And so one of the issues with VR is how do you get all the content everywhere people are consuming it? And people in the audience would be familiar with the idea that an MP4 file, which is what 360 video is, which is the less expensive, easier to capture version of VR, it's relatively easy to publish that. It's much harder to publish room scale, CG-driven VR for the Vive or for the Rift or for Sony PlayStation. But Transport is a place where anyone who's created any VR can publish to Transport, and it will be published and sold everywhere VR is sold. So that native VR creator doesn't have to go to Sony and to Valve and to the individual places to do their own deal. They can publish on Transport, which is Weaver's tech stack, and it will be available everywhere. Which from our standpoint is sort of the distribution element of it, right. But it's also importantly the top of the funnel, both from a native VR creator standpoint and also where consumers can go and discover VR.
I would imagine, Gigi, that gives you a pretty good elevator pitch when you're going to content creators, right?
Right. exactly.
So tell us about some of the content you're developing. Can you speak up a little bit too?
Yeah. So we have, through OddLot and Relevant, our other two companies, which have been in business for a number of years, we have a lot of relationships, whether it's directors or writers or other producers who bring things to us. And the ability, I think, to share with them this new technology and the ability to take their ideas and express it in VR in this new language is really exciting. And we're finding that, in fact, people like Jon Favreau and others are really excited and don't know how to get involved. And so because we've been in TV and film and theater and in those spaces for so long, they come and say, okay, help us figure this out. So it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was wondering. You come from Hollywood originally, whereas so much of the rest of the pitches are sort of Silicon Valley trying to, which, that's my bed, and I'm not going to try to pee in it, but like they don't know that much about content. So
Well, this is one of the
at least you can say we know content.
And this
And
is one of the and talent. That's
And talent.
That's really the key. I mean, and that's the challenge, right? I mean, artists and talented people that make these things, it is a skill set that is unique and not replicatable. And so it requires people who understand how to take that and make the best use of it.
And you can tell. I mean, you talk about the dissolving of the package media DVD landscape and the melting ice cube of the film business. You can feel in LA and Hollywood for the past few years, everyone collectively turning their head north to Silicon Valley for some level of answer to how growth is going to occur. And weirdly, at exactly the same time, Silicon Valley is casting its eyes south to figure out how it's going to solve the content issue.
Yeah.
And so there is a strange timing benefit to having the relationships with talent and being able to generate content because it creates a path to growth in what is otherwise a content industry that needs that.
And then, not to ask you to pee in your bed, but how
We'll not do that.
prepared is Hollywood?
For sure will not pee in my own bed. Will not do that.
I'm now taking this metaphor too far.
I have done that.
Yeah, well, I
How
also
prepared?
have, but I will not right now. I for sure will not right now.
Normally, the metaphor is way worse, and we're not going to do that either. How prepared is Hollywood? Like when you are meeting with talent, if you're talking to, there's so much that goes into just the idea of creating a VR film. How many storylines do you need? How much artistic control do you have to give up? Like, what kind of resistance are you encountering?
None.
None.
I mean, people are really, really excited. It's super exciting. I don't think we've been at the advent of a new medium like ever, because none of us are that old.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting. And we just did our first VR piece, and while we were working with the director, you want to fade to black because that's something we do. Well, you can't do that in a VR experience because people take the headset off. So you got to rethink how you're going to, what are the semiotics, what is the language, how do you do this stuff? That's super exciting to creative people. And as Clint said, at the same time, our landscape in TV and film is changing so radically. So it's like, oh, well, where do the creative folks go? This is a great place. This is an exciting place. So there have been no barriers from the creative side.
Well, there is a moment right now relative to the major studio system where there isn't a clear P&L for VR. Right? So most of the VR that you've seen that's associated with Hollywood anything, it comes from a P&A budget for the release of a film. Right? There isn't a specific place where they take their IP and turn it into content. And it's one of the opportunities for us because we go there and we say, we would like to do that with you. And we can't announce it right now, but soon we will. They give us their IP to produce content around known IP, which will be the first place that people go and discover that. They just don't have that P&L in their system. And that will change. But there's a moment right now where we have an opportunity.
But so in this medium, there's like a question of cart before the horse, but there's still a question of what is the cart and what is the horse. Like, are you producing content that no one can consume? Because I know that, I would imagine some studios are hesitant to get on board because there aren't headsets in people's hands. So what is you're investing in distribution platforms, but what's the consumption plan?
So it depends on which end of the telescope you're looking at, because in China, today, as we sit here, there are 2,000 roughly location-based VR installations in the month of February, 2 million people went through it, paying $5 for every 10 minutes in the experience. And so there is a market that is consuming, and these are motion-based pods that have either Rift or Rift rebuilds that are in them. But there is a market that is consuming and spending millions of dollars on VR right now as we sit here. And so from our standpoint, that plays in. You think of the strategy from the China strategy and the rest of the world strategy. How many HMDs are in the U.S. market is a major important fact for this year. But in our view, it's possibly even more important how the Chinese location-based VR market is going, because that's where people buy content on a minimum guarantee basis. They advance money against it. There's an economic system built around it. So I think the answer is it depends on where you're looking, but it's certainly there are consumption patterns in China that we like.
But is $10 million enough? Is the content any cheaper to make?
The content,
I mean, it depends on what you're actually making.
Yep.
You know, if it's room scale, it's one thing. If it's short digital, it's another. If it's 360 video. So there are ways to do it that are not exceedingly expensive, and there's ways to do it that are very expensive.
Yeah.
yeah.
When are you going to do stuff that's really expensive? Like, what's that going to look like?
We're working on something now that is has a high budget, but high budgets are, I mean, so the interesting thing to me is that there's this confluence of the video game universe and the non-video game traditional content world. What's interesting about that is that you have price points, both from a sale, like what you expect to pay for the content, and also from a budget perspective, that are kind of in both camps, right? So the high price point that we're talking about for an episodic, room scale, immersive, extraordinary experience is half or less of a major studio theatrical film budget, still. Mm-hmm. And that stands to reason, right? And there's less of a market, it hasn't, but it's still not so extraordinarily expensive that you can't experiment and test, and that's what we're doing.
What are the content challenges, whether it's, you know, just the cameras, the actual tools, or the storytelling?
The challenges are the opportunities, because we're all learning at the same time, which is really exciting. So I think the answer is it's all experimental. And the people who are gravitating to it from the creative side are the people that are willing to experiment. It's the people who really, I don't get it, and that's okay, that's exciting. Because you find as you go along the process in post-production in particular, it's hard. Like, we don't understand. There's no pathway. So you're figuring it out as you go, and you have to kind of jerry-rig stuff around to get what you want. That's fun. That's exciting.
Yep.
And so for most people, especially people who've come from these giant studio films where everything's so big, the ability to really get back down to actually making the stuff is really fun and a challenge.
Yeah. And so do you think that this is in some ways the future of Hollywood? And if so, what's the timeline? Like, at what point, so you get in super early, you're writing VisiCalc for the Apple II. When does Sony Pictures come behind you? And are you worried about that?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
You feel like you have the playground to yourself right now?
Partly. I think the truth is that there is an initial phase. We're all in the wagons west, is the truth. I mean, there's no, if someone at this conference or anywhere else is telling you exactly how it's going to unfold, I would love to speak to that person.
Everybody at this conference is telling us
Yeah,
that.
if anybody knows exactly how it's going to go, I would love to talk to that person. But I think we don't know. And since we don't know, what we can do is take advantage of the opportunities where players who have tons of really well-known IP, like Sony and other places, are waiting. They're waiting, and they'll let us step in and establish a brand when it's less clear. And I think that's principally what we think of as sort of phase one of it. As soon as it becomes exceedingly clear, when we have that Halo moment, when Xbox really exploded because Halo was such a success, when you have that moment, there will be a land grab. Mm-hmm. But the goal of our business is to position ourselves between now and then as a brand that people trust for a high level of content. And that's the opportunity.
So the goal is to already be there?
Yeah, and I think there's room. I mean, I think there's a lot of room is the thing. So I'm not worried about, all the air is going to get sucked out of the room, and there's going to be no place for us. I think there's a ton of room, and I think I don't know if it's what's next for Hollywood. It's another medium, like it's another thing. It's not the death of TV because of the VCR. It's another thing, which is exciting. It's additive. It's not detracting.
So what do you worry about? What is the big challenge for you? Keeps you up at night about what you're doing?
People.
The humans. Finding the humans. We need to find the humans who can speak the language of storytelling in this medium, that are capable of growing through some of these developmental issues that you have as you learn a new medium and as technology changes. What people may be slow to do because of the slowness to really dig into the market is they may miss the people, and we want to find the humans.
Do you mean the talent, the audience, the directors, the camera people?
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. And even the people that understand and start to develop out the economics. You know, right now it really is the Wild West. Agents will be there. There's no established set of how this stuff works yet. And it'll start to establish. And the exciting thing is people right now are very collaborative and trying to work this stuff out. I mean, we were talking today. We're doing a contract. The law firms don't know how to do, nobody knows how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So we're all figuring it out, and hopefully that's an opportunity to kind of do it better.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Onward into the Wild Wild West, then.
Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah, onward into the wild. Where Hollywood goes from here is not impossible to say.
Anytime you say the future of Hollywood, that's so what you're sort of the message that you're sending here at this conference to anybody is like, this is one model, right? To say, we're going to back the storytellers because you're really a content-first model, aren't
Absolutely.
It's 100% right.
And our content gets pulled across all different areas. So, for example, Ender's Game, which is a movie, is perfect for VR. So we're going to develop episodic VR out of Ender's Game. We did a show called $1 Million Quartet that was on Broadway. Now it's an 8-part series on CMT. So all of the stories and the content that we develop will end up being pulled through different platforms, whether it's VR, whether it's digital, whether it's television, film, wherever it is. For us, it's about story and the people who tell the stories.
All right. Gigi Pritzker, Clint Kisker from Madison Wells Media. Keep an eye out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.